I've built this channel by painting gruesome cosmic horrors, horrific alien invaders, and a whole slew of other unspeakable monstrosities. But today, we paint what could possibly be the most nauseating creature of them all. I painted up much of this guy while beta testing a new paint line that you may or may not have access to. I used these to mix up some very recognizable colors, so I'll name an equivalent color by mainstream brands where applicable. I'll also link to the Mr. Pigment's YouTube channel in the description down below if acquiring these paints is something that you're interested in. To create a base layer over the black primer, I mix up a dark violet hue that is very similar to Dark Plum Pro Acryl. This is the only time that I'm using a size 3 synthetic brush for this paint up, which is normal for this first coat of paint on most miniatures. Very similar to Dark Plum, this color goes on quite bright, but will become significantly darker once it dries. This darkening of the paint has more to do with the translucent nature of acrylic paints, which are easily affected by the black primer below. To begin, I'm going to run some quinacridone magenta through my airbrush to establish an area where I want to paint a pink OSL backlight. When I've done this in the past, I've used Liquitex muted violet ink through the airbrush to create this base of color. I'm spraying this from below the miniature on its left side. I want this pink OSL to be only slightly visible when the miniature is viewed from the front. I will paint the miniature in such a way that it appears to be well lit from its upper right side. Now I'm going to add a little titanium white to the quinacridone magenta. This creates a color very close to dark hot pink. If I'm going to add OSL to something this fucking adorable, it might as well be pink OSL. Throughout this project, I'm using a size 2 synthetic brush for most of the heavy layering such as this. Then I add a little more titanium white to the mix, which creates a standard looking pink color. I'm using this in place of Pro Acryl's fluorescent pink. I know that this isn't fluorescent, but I'm getting very similar results to the fluorescent pink, however with much better coverage. I've switched to a smaller size 1 sable brush for this. I'll only use 2 brushes for the rest of this painting. A size 2 synthetic brush for covering large areas with color, and the size 1 sable brush for finer details. I paint this within the existing hot pink layer. The final step for brightening the OSL is to use titanium white to edge highlight the features of the miniature that would be mostly affected by this bright pink backlight. Then I go over these white highlights with a thin mix of the previous pink color. I thin this final pink application with water so that it isn't too opaque. I want the white to show through this pink layer and make it look bright. Pink is becoming one of my favorite looking OSL colors to add to a miniature, and it's one of the easiest to paint convincingly. Moving on to the fur, I base coat all of it with manganese brown. Well, everything except for the fur that's already pink. This is such a great color and a great quality paint. This has become my favorite brown paint since the moment I first used it. It has great coverage even when significantly thinned down. I'd say that you could use any medium dark brown in place of this. Something like Vallejo chocolate brown or Army Painter onyx skin should work fine here. Before brightening the brown with white, I add bismuth yellow to the mix. I don't really like how brown looks when lightened only with white. I found that it always looks way too desaturated when I've done it in the past. I'm using bismuth yellow to create a sort of golden brown, then I'll lighten it with white. Pro Acryl yellow or Army Painter demonic yellow are fine substitutes in this mix, but you'll probably have to use more of it. This bismuth yellow has a very high pigment density and great coverage, so I don't need to add very much to get the desired effect. It's important to note that anytime I'm painting near the edge of the OSL, I leave a band of the shadow color between the OSL and the naturally lit area. This will sell the idea that the OSL side of the character would be in complete shadow if it weren't for the OSL. As I progress, I build up the brightness of the fur in a few stages, adding a little more titanium white for each brightness level. I also continue to add bismuth yellow as needed to maintain a slight yellow ochre hue. I don't believe that I've discussed this before, but when I build up highlights in several layers like this, I always follow the same pattern over the miniature, meaning I always start at the same spot and finish in the same location with each layer of paint. This is very apparent with Howie the Duck, built Platypus, where you can see that I always begin with the tail, then proceed to the feet and hands, and finish with the face. I keep missing the right hand here, but I do remedy that a bit later. I didn't catch it all on camera, but I paint the eyes very simply. I coat the entire eye with Payne's Gray, then I make a medium-sized reflection with Wolf Gray, before finishing it off with a small specular highlight of Titanium White. I'm using a triad of gray paints by Duncan Rhodes 2 Thin Coats. Platypus bills are nearly black in appearance, and I want to maintain that look here with this piece. I'm base coating the bill with Death Reaper, which is a very dark charcoal gray. It should read as black once I've highlighted it with lighter grays. I map out a few highlight areas with Wizard Gray. It's important that I keep these gray highlights relatively small. If I get carried away with the size of these reflections, the duck bill could end up looking like a gray bill with black shadows instead of a black bill with gray highlights. It's a fine line to walk, and one that I've accidentally crossed on several occasions. Here, I feel like I nailed the highlights in a way that keeps the duckbill looking black, for the most part. Lastly, for the duckbill, I dot in some highlights with Carcharodon Gray within the Wizard Gray area. These are some very small highlights that I place with little dots, short lines, and some stippling. The strokes of this final highlight color will remain visible on the finished mini, so I want them to look like light is interacting with the surface of the black bill. And this is how it looks when the duckbill is all finished. For my next trick, I'll paint Howie's white astronaut suit without using white paint. I begin by applying Iron Wolf by the Army Painter over the existing dark plum layer. The underside of this character is an extreme shadow, so I don't need to completely cover all of the dark plum there. Also, just as before, I leave a small amount of dark plum visible between this layer of paint and the magenta that makes up the edge of the pink OSL. I'll try to make the outer edge of this layer as smooth as possible by thinning it a little with water. Next, I use a light blue-gray color and continue building toward a white appearance. This is placed within the Iron Wolf layer. I'm basically just layering up shadows as I work towards the final light blue shade. The darker I start with the shadows, the brighter the final off-white color will look. Since I want a smooth transition between these shadow layers, I try to draw my stroke beginning from the shadow area and finishing at the point where I want the suit to be the brightest. Less paint will be deposited at the beginning of the stroke than at the end of the stroke. This should help with the transition without having to resort to glazing. The final color in this progression is Glacier Blue by Vallejo. This is an off-white color with a bluish hue. It will serve as our final white highlights. I feel that painting like this is so much more fun than using something like a white base coat and a wash over it. That has never looked quite right to me. Also, with the approach that I'm using today, the darker shadows will make it appear that the character is affected by dramatic lighting. I almost always prefer this look. Proportionately speaking, much more of the surface area will get painted with Glacier Blue than if this were a typical final highlight. Normally, the final highlight color wants to bring brightness to the piece without detracting from the overall appearance of the mid-tone color. Here, I don't want the suit to look like it's wolf gray with glacier blue highlights. I want the suit to appear white. Therefore, I have to cover much more area with this glacier blue color. We have just 2 more little details to paint. First, I'm going to paint Howie's little glow stick green. This is not a euphemism. He has a glow stick on a lanyard hanging around his neck. After base coating the stick with Pro Acryl bright green, I highlight it with bold titanium white. This white is a single band of white centered on the exposed side of the glow stick. Then the glow stick receives a quick swipe of Vallejo fluorescent green. The visor is the final piece of this intergalactic puzzle. I begin by applying a coat of burnt sienna, but any medium brown will work here. I'm using bismuth yellow to paint the main color of the visor. Using the game art as a guide, I will leave small areas of burnt sienna visible within the yellow reflection. This will add some depth and interest here, which is a good idea since this is right next to the character's face. Generally speaking, I like to draw the viewer's attention towards the face. This is easily achieved by highlighting the face and area around it more than other features on the miniature. I continue the highlights with ice yellow. I place this within the existing yellow layer. I also focus this on the sharp edge of the visor. Ice yellow can appear a little chalky once it's in place. I usually like to glaze a little of the previous layer color around the edges of the ice yellow to help smooth things out. For this visor, I'm actually glazing burnt sienna around the highlights, and I'm digging how this looks. Finally, the helmet visor gets an edge highlight of titanium white. I would like to thank my generous channel members for supporting all that I do on this channel. You too can become a channel member using the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of monotremes.